everyone. Welcome back. Before we move on, I just want to take a moment to honor you and what you are embarking on through this quest. You know, this undertaking of consciousness is not for the weak-hearted. What you are committing to is only for those who have courage, who are willing to see themselves in a new way, in such an intimate fashion. This is not an easy task for all. Examining your past and deconstructing belief systems and debunking cultural ways of being is not something everyone can do. So take a moment with me to honor yourself and for being brave enough to be here with me. So now we're going to talk about one of the biggest obstacles to connections. Want to know what it is? It's the psychological process called projection. What it is in the most simplest way is this reflexive emotional habit that we humans have where, and especially parents, by the way, where we literally put onto the other, we literally place onto the other all that we ourselves think and feel. You know, it's because we think of our children as our own, as ours, that we parents especially are masters at projection. We ad-lib, willy-nilly put onto our children all our own ideations, our ideologies, our belief systems and emotions. And children in their absorbent state, children are very absorbent, they begin to readily ingest these into their own psyches, incorporating our feelings and thoughts as if it's their own. And in this process, children fail to curate and develop and cultivate their own ways of doing and thinking and feeling. And often, they even wildly abandon all their own inherent natural ways, their natural essence. And they abduct that and replace that with their parents' essence. Take a father I recently observed at the park the other day. Now, here was a dad playing with his kid, and the kid was simply playing catch with him. The child seemed content enough. He wasn't really saying anything. But the father kept on and on, kept rallying him, saying, "Don't be scared to catch the ball. Don't be afraid to throw it harder. Come on now. I know you're scared. Don't be scared. I'm going to catch it. Nothing will happen." And the father had this running commentary. And the father wasn't being mean or nasty, not at all. But here was a clear case of projection. Now, here was the child. The child was just playing catch, wasn't saying a word. He seemed joyful and peaceful enough. But the father obviously was feeling as if he wanted the game to go a particular way. He wanted the kid to be playing catch in a different way. He had a different vision for how things should be. So he kept projecting that onto the son and kept instructing the kid and kept commanding him to be in a particular way. I bet you can think of 1,000 instances where you projected your stuff onto your kid. I know I project stuff on my kid almost on a daily basis. You know, you see your kid sitting on the couch all quiet, and you immediately think to yourself, "Oh my goodness, my kid is sad." Or you see your kid at the park watching a group of friends playing, and you immediately project, "Oh my goodness, my kid is feeling left out." Projection, it is an automatic, instinctive, emotional habit where we put onto our children all that we ourselves don't realize we're feeling, thinking, or believing. And then sometimes we go even further than just putting on our thoughts or our feelings onto them. Then we do a double projection and we make an interpretation of our kids' behavior. We make a whole story around it, such as maybe we may say, "Oh, my kid is so angry with me, and that's why he's not looking at me right now." You know, we inject meaning into our children's behaviors. We make whole scripts and whole dialogues. And all of this really is coming from within us. We do this in all relationships, by the way, not just with our children. And it's always based on our histories, on our stories, on our ways of being and our ways of thinking. Let's take the example of Martha, you know, one of my clients recently who was in session with me. She came with her daughter, Sarah. And in the session, Sarah announced to us that she had not been invited to the prom by any boy, and she was going to go with her girlfriends. So Martha immediately jumped onto her and said, "Oh my goodness, you must be feeling so bad. I'm so sorry. I know that it really doesn't matter, but maybe I should call one of my friends and ask her to make her son take you out." And she went on and on with her suggestions and her anxiety. Now, all this while, Sarah, she hadn't said a word. She hadn't said anything about what she was feeling. But I could just see that Sarah was just sitting there looking kind of befuddled, because I know that Sarah's authentic feelings were just sitting there unexpressed. And now I could see that she was having the experience of needing to defend herself against her mother's assertions and worries. So here's a case where the parent just completely misses the boat. The parent, in their own anxiety, doesn't take a pause and just simply spews their own belief systems, their own feelings onto their child. And then what does the poor child do? Now the child has to rebel or debate or negotiate or argue, when in the first place, if the parent had simply taken a pause and understood that she was about to project, none of this would have been relevant. You see, in the pause, she would have allowed her daughter the space and the freedom to explore her own reality in her own way without interference from her mother. You know, I always say projection, it's kind of deadly. It leads us to create all sorts of labyrinths and movies and complicated plots, all in our own head. And it truly begins to interfere with what's truly happening. In fact, we think the projection is so real, we almost believe that whatever we were projecting truly did happen. And so the process of awakening to realize that the projection was false often feels like a cataclysmic shock to the system. You know, we are just completely clueless to the idea that our children, they know what they feel. They are able to experience their own experiences. They are fully developed in their capacity to understand who it is they are. So in this way, we keep superimposing our ways onto them, and we abduct them from their own natural unfolding, and then soon they develop an inauthentic sense of self, or they completely shut down from us. You know, because it's so instinctive and unconscious and reactive, this process, projection, and I really want you to understand it, it really becomes the cause of a lot of conflict between parent and child. And becoming aware, awakened to the fact that we're projecting is really a huge gift you can give to all your relationships. So what do? In order to resist projecting onto our children, we need to cultivate a new habit that takes its place. And I call it the habit of a conscious pause. This means we have to train ourselves to enter a space of observation and witness without outward action. We need to begin to listen to our own self before the stuff comes out of us. Instead of reacting to our children with all our stuff and baggage, our ideas, our emotions, our beliefs, our expectations, our ideologies, no. Now we listen, we see that the source is in us, we take a pause, and we begin to reflect. Is what I'm feeling right now worthy of sharing? We begin to truly ask ourselves, you know, where is this reaction coming from? Is it truly something that is going to be beneficial to my child? Or is it something that is appeasing my own ego? Is this reaction more about what's truly happening in the isness of this moment? Or is it because I'm replaying some old habit of mine? This slight pause and reflection may seem so mundane or ordinary. Let me tell you, it is powerful. It is profound. It allows us to take that very meaningful step back and inward to examine our own selves and watch how we have created the agenda, how we've set up the movie, and how we've set our kid up for failure. You know, in my own life, I remember a moment of such drastic projection that I have written about it in my books. It was a day that, you know, I was preparing this tasty lasagna dish for my child. So painstakingly efforting every layer. I had cut all the vegetables into little slivers and triangle shapes and circles, and I was making this like masterpiece. And all the while I was cooking, I could just hear the future, where I was going to receive the trophy and the award for the best parent, and how my daughter would be so grateful and how she would be so excited that her mother was such a good cook. I was just in this reverie and this fantasy of wanting, deeply desiring some acknowledgement for my parenting, but I didn't know this at that time. So here I was preparing this lasagna, and then, you know how this is going to go already, I bet. So then my child comes home, and I thought she would appreciate, she would fall on my feet, she would lick my feet and say, thank you, I wish every child had a parent like you. But did she do that? No, she didn't. She looked at the lasagna and she said, ew. Yes, she did. Evil child. She said, ew. And she proceeded to take apart my entire masterpiece. Layer by layer, I saw those beautiful triangles and those beautiful multicolored pieces of vegetables flying to the sides of her plate with disregard. She had the audacity to destroy my creation right before my eyes. I sent her to a room. I said, evil child, you should have been living in a homeless shelter. And I just sent her packing with her head down in shame. That made me feel justified. And it was only later that I realized that this whole debacle wasn't because my kid was bad. It wasn't because my kid was disrespectful. It was only because I was craving some sort of acknowledgement. I was hungry for some sort of trophy. I was feeling so sorry for myself that my vision did not come true. But she didn't know that. I can still remember how my daughter looked at me when I first began unleashing my anger on her. She had this innocent look of utter disdain, of deep sorrow. Our children's desire is not to upset us. Our children's desire is not to hurt us. They are simply being their own spirits. But because we are so wrapped up, so seduced by our own agendas, that we are the ones who believe that they are disobeying us, that they are going against us. What they're going against is our agenda, but they're not going against themselves. So what would we rather? Would we rather they abscond their own true sense of self in order to pander to our needs and expectations? That's the question that a conscious parent asks. So now, given all that I now know through the cultivation of conscious parenting skills, I now know that if I had paused in that moment, first, if I had been aware that I'd even been in a movie, that would have been good enough. But given that I didn't know I was in a movie, in that moment, before reacting to my child, if I had paused, if I had just stepped back and reflected, checked my ego, asked myself, is what I'm about to do going to be for her best benefit, or is this just an expression of my ego? Just noticing the ego would have allowed me to take another route, to make another conscious choice. And this led me to the awareness that we need to accept the unique separateness of our children. Yes, our children are one with us, they are always with us, but they are uniquely separate beings. I needed to accept that my child's palate for food was different than mine. That's all. That's all this was about. And I made it all about disrespect and disobedience and discipline. It was all about accepting that my child is simply different. So you see, when we engage in the act of consciousness, we begin to detach from our own egoic ideations, from our own desire for validation and worth. And we begin to allow our children to be free to be their own beings. And when we acknowledge our children or other beings for being their own unique, separate selves, we begin to honor and appreciate our own separate selves. And this honoring allows for great empathy. We begin to empathize with each other's differences and begin to celebrate them rather than being personally threatened by them. So for today's task, I want you to become aware of how much of a movie maker you are and a script writer you are. I want you to become aware of the movies you script in your head of how things should be. and how you often set yourself and your kid up for failure. So you're going to begin to reflect on what are the many ways in which you unconsciously, preemptively design your child's life and how things are going to unfold, all in your mind, and then superimpose this way of being onto your children. I'm going to ask you to become aware of the many ways you project your emotions onto them as well. For example, if you are anxious about a test they are about to take, do you project this anxiety onto them as well? So through this exercise of becoming aware of our movies, we begin to notice the subtle and the not so subtle ways that we project our ideas, our belief systems, our feelings, our thoughts, all onto our children. And through this exercise of becoming aware, you could write it down in your journal, you could tape it in a dictaphone, in any way that you choose to record how you're creating these movies. When you become aware, you now begin to take them back. You now begin to pull them back away from your child. So your child doesn't bear the burden of meeting those movie scripts of yours. They don't have to play the lead. You don't have to be the director. You begin to release your child from your movie agendas, and you allow them to experience their own destinies in their own unique way. So today, as you become aware of your projection, of your movie making, remember to take those pauses. I want you to really experience the power of the pause, what it means to step back and go inward. So take today to open yourself up to this deep yet profound shift in your awareness.